Welcome to Point to Rise, your podcast that gives you permission to dream big, take messy action, and turn your talent into profit while turning your back on perfection. My name is Susanne, high performance and mindset coach, former international ballerina, profitable entrepreneur, and founder of Point to Rise, a movement designed to empower dancers. It is my mission to use my own story as an inspiration for today's generation of dancers. And now sit back, stretch, warm up, or sip your coffee and love learning how much it matters to point at yourself first to rise to all that you are capable of. Hello and welcome back to the show. So grateful for you to tune back in. We have very special guest, somebody that I think a year ago I would have not brought onto the show. And since I am more into building a bridge between performing arts and everyone else that's out there to show you that we're really truly all the same and that we are in some way or another struggle, enjoy, love the same things. Julian Guderley is our guest today. Now, Julian is a facilitator and coach, podcaster, entrepreneur, and planetary regenerator. Julian is the podcast producer, high performance coach, and event creator. Over the past 15 years, he has hosted transformational gathering and special events on 3 continents with thousands of attendees. Julian is also the creator of the Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, broadcasting over 300 episodes on regeneration, positive planetary actions, and systemic change. He has been interviewing generative impact leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, and artists. Julian has experience with hosting a venture capital think tank, as well as having supported several startups with or during successful venture capital fundraising. Julian also understands his service to empower and enable individuals and groups to contribute their unique gifts to the world. Julian's high performance coaching is tailored for successful entrepreneurs to develop the insights, skills, and frequency that deepens their personal freedom and purpose while being fully in service of their Dharma. Having learned to speak 5 languages fluently before the age of 20, and having lived on 3 continents, Julian combines his deep devotional practice as a yogi with his unique experience as a true global citizen in his events, podcasts, and programs. Business Insider recently featured Julian among top podcasters to listen to in 2021. Do I have to say more? Buckle up, go on a walk, do what you want to do, and have a listen to this episode. Julian, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Awesome. I'm equally as stoked, Susanne, and let's rock and roll.
Yes, let's rock and roll. We actually live in the same city. I think this is the first conversation that we're having on a podcast that I'm having with a person on a podcast that's living in Victoria. So what are the odds? And I am thrilled about also that we have the same background from where we were born originally. We're both German, living in Victoria. I mean, this conversation really truly had to happen. I introduced you prior to us jumping on here, and I listed all your accomplishments and what you do. And I want to go a little bit deeper and see what is your superpower and what is your definition of success for you, for your person.
Mhm. Wow, I love big questions right off, right off the bat. You listed all my accomplishments in the introduction. That was a short introduction, I hope.
No, that was actually.
Well, a mouthful. Okay. Well, so what is success for me? Today, on this day, I will define it as doing what I love doing when I want to be doing that. That is a form of success, definitely very strong definition for me personally, because freedom and adventure have a really high ranking in my inner value system. And so of course sometimes we make commitments and then we have to compromise with what we do when. But when there are commitments, then usually there are our own choices in the first place. So I definitely since many, many years now, give my best to make my choices based on that definition of success. Is that going to allow me to do what I want to do when I want to do it? And surprisingly, it's not even that hard, and it does definitely lead to results. You got to just radically own your own shit when you do so. And, that would be success, I guess, just to start with. But success can also be many other things, like, living in your dream home at the water, or making X income over Y amount of time. Like, these are all also layers of success. But I think that the first one is what I'll stand with. And then the first part of your question was, what is my superpower?
Or superpowers, because we can have more than just one.
There's a few, two that come to mind. One is I bet many people listening can relate, and you probably can relate, is being, a bit of a global nomad chameleon, an international chameleon. I love diving in and out of cultural contexts. I like diving in and out of different languages, and I love interrelating with people. That's maybe the superpower, if I were to say it in one word. The act of interrelating is understanding that we are, never fully only the limited part that you would say is the the Julian part of this conversation, because we're actually in an open field of interrelating where, there we draw those boundaries where you begin and where I end actually together. Now, physically, materially, that might be a bit harder to wrap your head around in, just the 20 seconds, but in a social context, most people actually know that phenomena. And so interrelating is like a superpower of mine that I've been practicing since I'm a teenager in different cultures and different cultural contexts and different languages. And I just really love it to, understand that I can literally become a different person in a different context or in a different social group. Doesn't mean that I always will, because there's also part of me that's like, strongly me, but so I love playing with that. That's one of the superpowers. Another one is, hopefully many people would relate with that too. And it's just curiosity. I find life in general has so many bends and turns that, I couldn't have predicted. Just like you and I connecting, we live in the same city, we're from the same country originally. Like, these are not really things that, I necessarily go out there to look for in life. But then when they happen, they're like really big signs of like, hey, pay attention right here. And so when those signs show up, curiosity has really served me well over the years.
Wow. Curiosity. Isn't that something that I, when I look back into my childhood, I was a very curious child, but then it was taken away, or let's just say not encouraged with getting older and wiser. It was almost something that was a no, because if you want to fit in a box, or if you want to be in certain standards and serve certain firms or cultural dimensions, curiosity is something that is not really looked at as comfortable. Let's just say it that way. And that's how I unlearned being curious about everything and anything. And I find it is actually something that we should go back to, because it serves in so many perspectives. Can you talk a little bit more about your journey around curiosity? Because I feel that you never lost it.
Hmm. Thank you. I'm glad that you can tap into that, and a part of me is definitely like a full yes to what you just said. There's many layers to that one too. So I'll start somewhere and then hopefully can wrap it into, a bit of sense making here. I totally agree with you. Curiosity seems to be something that everyone gets born with. And when that gets encouraged and nurtured or loved into being, I believe it becomes all of our superpower. And I believe curiosity and collaboration in as like a duo, they make us unstoppable, because it means both. You are allowed to be curious for you and your journey and what's in your sphere. And through collaboration, you would then tie that together with other people and what they're doing, right? Now mix in healthy boundaries and resilience. And I think we're pretty equipped when it comes to values and how we could operate in the whole world as children growing up or as adults unlearning and relearning. But you're right, there's definitely mechanisms in the world that discourage that. And, the industrial schooling system is by far like number one, the industrial workplace or the modern workplace just as much. Yeah, I mean, short answer, I believe that's totally by design. And as you said, like it creates uncomfortable ripples when someone is when someone is, curious in a context where that is discouraged. But nonetheless, if you're listening to that and you maybe are living in a place where you'd rather be curious and ask questions and you're discouraged to do that, maybe it's really worth to continue to ask those questions. And maybe the answers might show that there's like a cul-de-sac in that specific workplace or in that specific relationship, but it actually will continue to reroute you yourself back to what, what's the next step for you. And then I also want to, just admit, only because curiosity is one of my superpowers and is one of, the things that I've definitely not lost and continue to nourish as much as I can. I also see myself fail at curiosity sometimes by becoming a more rigid, older kind of, human. What I mean with that is, as we all get older, often we have these preferences, these particularities that we want to have honored, and some of them are very important. And I think we all deserve to have our boundaries honored, and we have our we get honored out what we desire from specific interactions. But sometimes, I'll make a very plain example. Sometimes it would be so much better to really be curious and find a way back into the joy of life. And so the example is, something everyone does, which is, dishes. And if you have a dishwasher, then you're loading the dishwasher and unloading it. So that could be with your kid, that could be with your husband or wife, could even be with a friend, When someone doesn't do the task at hand the way you would want them to do it, it's really, really easy to either be upset or to say, hey, but I wanted it this other way, or however we usually deal with that. But curiosity might deal with it differently. And that's kind of what I want to throw in there. I've watched myself over and over with, like very simple things in life that I might not actually lead with curiosity in them because I'm so used to getting things done the way I get them done. And what I've learned over, many years in relationship is that curiosity has even more room in my life to spread. And when I actually get around to do that and I just ask the question, hey, like, why did you just do that the way you did? Rather than, let's say, being upset and like, oh, but that belongs somewhere else in the kitchen or whatever. Even though the answer might not be satisfying to my organized OCD mind, but it creates a social opening, like an empathetic opening to connect. And so, yeah, that's something I'm already practicing in parts, but definitely want to get better at.
Wow, that is such a good point, and I felt so caught in my huh, not inability, however, my room for improvement and being curious around how else can we do things. And it has something to do with patience too, right? Like it just understanding empathy and patience to
Mhm.
understand and taking ourselves out of the occasion and understanding where, how do other people think about this or how do they feel about this? So great point. I'll sit on that for a bit. I want to shift a little bit. Let's talk about your podcast. Over
Right?
300. How did you think that Green Planet, Blue Planet is something you want to launch? Like, where did the desire come from, and how did you build it to be one of the top podcasts?
Mhm. Thank you for bringing some spotlight to that. So the starting point, there's two pieces to it. One was I was really fed up and frustrated at the time about, the common mainstream narrative around what we call climate change, around what we call, like sustainability, pollution, etc. What I mean with that is I was fed up for how doomsday that narrative is. And I find it quite difficult until this day to have a very open-minded and very, just like observant conversation with anyone who has pre-existing opinions on what is climate change and what is sustainability, which usually, you know, isn't really exciting or feels good or leads to good solutions, which is still the state of the world we're seeing. And so my desire was to find people, to meet people, to interview people that are leaders and embodiment kind of models, like role models in bringing regeneration and sustainability to the world. And, there's different ways to do that. Somebody might do that with the activism they do. Somebody might do that with a company they run, and somebody might do this with, the coaching business they built, because they are, just really caring for supporting people on their journey. But that was the kickoff for me, was that I wanted to have healthier conversations about the state of the world and how to change it. And many of the places that I was hanging out at the time, actually, including the World Economic Forum, that I was a part of one of the youth organizations, I just realized, like, these are dead end streets to just, places of power and places of geopolitical power that are not necessarily actually going to ever lead to change, because it's just like roundabout, every 4 to 5 to 10 years, the same thing just keeps on looping. And so that frustration needed an outlet. And then the second part to it was just time to do my own thing again, which I'd done before. And then I, kind of did sideward steps into here, in the Pacific Northwest, Vancouver Island, different tech startups and different, private companies, like smaller private companies, where I consulted and yada, yada, yada. I was, employed also over time in different companies. And that point hit where I'm like, you know what? I've tried this now for the last 3 years. I'm really realizing I need to be my own boss and I want to do my own thing. And so those two met each other, those two factors. And yeah, pretty much overnight, for anyone who knows Vancouver Island, and Susanne, you do, I wasn't a Fino at the time. I was having a drink with my friend, a non-alcoholic drink, but we were like, meeting for drinks. And we, he listened, and then he was like, why don't you just start it, man? And so from that moment, I was like, I'm going to do it. And so I set up the first, 10 interviews, and then just went ahead. And I think the determination of desiring better conversations about, the topic of regeneration is what kept me going. And then started to slowly carve out a niche where people are, tuning in, and where people are in touch with me and reach out to me about those topics.
Mm. So when you're talking about regeneration, we're not only talking about our ecosystem, but we're also, and ecosystem might even not be the right word, but we're also talking about processes that we have put in place, like how mothers have to behave and transition into motherhood from being a working mother into motherhood. That was a very interesting episode, and I could very, very much relate to that topic, particularly how society, just wants you to be this person and then this person without having any kind of net or options available. And I want to go there a little bit, like what other areas in this world do you feel need regeneration? And really, it takes all of us to really make that effort, and we can do all of our part to it. 2 questions.
Okay, well, I'll give my best to answer those questions, and I'll start with saying regeneration to me is a principle of life. It's an inherent principle that is operating in all of life. It's rebirth, it's rejuvenation, right? It's regrowth. You can observe it in biology. And so I think the underlying problem we have in this day and age is that there are opposing worldviews, and one of them is based on Cartesian science and philosophy, which believes we are machines that are separate from nature. And this is, too deep of a rabbit hole to get stuck in. But basically, I believe that's where a very big problem is, that then goes into all topics of life, that we're seeing the natural world and ourselves and each other like machines that need to be adjusted. And, I believe we're fundamentally part of life. So nature doesn't exist outside of us, but we are nature. And as such, regeneration is the principle that operates on this planet to give life, to, hospice life to death, and then to rebirth life through the cycle of rebirth. And so we can see that with the fungi kingdom. We can see that in the forest. There's many, many biological examples. And so I believe we as humans, as we're waking up to that understanding, and in physics, now we talk about quantum physics, and I don't want to get lost there either, but as we understand that there's so much more that's really happening here than just a mechanical world with cogs and wheels that we, can put in pills and adjust the volume knob. Now, when we look at it that way, I believe regeneration is actually part of everyone's life and every topic, because that is the principle of nature. And the more we understand and collaborate with that principle within us, in our relationships with each other, in our relationship with ourselves, and in our relationship with the natural world that is also around us, I think, a lot of topics can come into right relationship again, or all of these relationships can come back into right relationship. And so that's how I see the word regeneration, really, and the understanding of it. And it's like, yeah, it connects across many, many different topics. And it goes for every single person, that wherever you find access to that in your life, it can play a role. It doesn't necessarily need to mean regenerative agriculture, even though that's a fascinating subject. And, there's a lot to be said about that. But it can simply mean to understand, if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, somewhere where there's 4 seasons, it can simply mean to understand that in different seasons, your body needs different amounts of rest and playtime. And when you're honoring these cycles, you're honoring your own health, and you're honoring the cycles of regeneration in a, somewhat abstract, somewhat direct way. Like a micro example to make, right? When it comes to our purchasing behavior and our overproduction of plastics, well, it's a lot more complex, right? Like, we need to demand industries and governments to stop doing these things. And at the same time, we need to become more conscientious consumers. So it's a two-way street, and it's not an easy equation. But ultimately, we can't overproduce something that we know is maybe on some level still part of the world, and therefore not entirely unnatural, but ultimately also created by us, and turns into like plastic is a very, very tricky topic, but into like a black goo that covers our entire planet. And so we have to stop doing it. It's that simple. And then, what we already have produced, we can maybe recycle until eternity to continue to mold things out of it. But so that idea of regeneration and understanding the cycle of life will help us understand and help us inform how to solve even the biggest problems when we come at it together.
Wow, I found my mind going in many different directions while we were talking, because it is such a big topic, really huge, and that we really truly are the creator of our world in so many different ways and means. And what we're actually doing is not really helpful or in a sustainable way. Um, let's talk about breath work. So let me give you a little bit of a background on breath work. I, when dancing, was never really able to breathe deeply. Like, I would get exhausted pretty much 30 seconds into dancing, and it felt like I couldn't breathe. There was this heaviness on my chest, and it felt like I'm going to pass out or die. Okay. And the more work I have done, I found that there was actually trauma sitting right here that made it harder for me to breathe. Or when I felt there is some strain on my body, it would give me the signal that you're out, you need to stop. Okay. So I started with like some very, very calm breath work a few months ago. And I would love to hear from you all the benefits that we're actually holding back if we're not really tapping into this modality that is out there that could really open up so many different ways of how we can expand our mind and our ability to perform.
Mhm. Yeah. So best way to go into the topic is to, take a deep breath. If you're on a walk right now, or if you're driving, and just, become aware of your breath as you're listening, and connect to the inflow and the outflow of it. It's always going to be step one, no matter which part of breath work we talk about. My access to breath work about 15 years ago had to do with yoga, and had to do with pranayama, and had to do with Kriya yoga. And then later on, different forms of Kriya yoga and Kundalini yoga. And those breath patterns are, they're ancient sciences from, the yogic and Vedic tradition. Also, breath work can be what we call holotropic breath work, which is quite a bit different. It's usually over oxygenation through the mouth. So you're laying down in most of those scenarios on your back, opening the mouth wide and like really hyperventilating, which then after 20, 30, 40 minutes can create massive amounts of healing potential based on the oxygen exchange and the way that your blood basically gets richer in oxygen. And it's a huge tool for reducing PTSD, for connecting to feelings of trauma. But so to start with, basically there are different forms of breath work that we can do. And I think really, really when it comes down to it, it's important to simply understand like your awareness of your breath is always going to be step one. And then different situations require different scenarios of breathing. So like in the dancing example, yeah, I mean, you're in a high performance athletic pattern, right? So your body is just going to have to do that pattern. And to bring in conscious breath into that would require probably another few months of training to just allow the body to also oxygenate at the same time. So, to talk about the benefits a bit, I mean, the benefits we know of through breath work are definitely balancing blood pressure. It's, more time in deep sleep. It's oxygenated blood, as I just said, which then allows your body to process more oxygen and therefore feel a lot more alive. Usually, simple benefit, but stronger respiratory function, which then leads to a stronger immune system. And for those who know Wim Hof or Wim Hof breathing methods, like, I mean, this guy is the real deal in the sense that he's taken Kriya yoga techniques and made them quite popular over the last 10 years with his cold exposure and going into cold water and holding the breath, but also because he's literally kicked out a virus that was injected into his bloodstream for scientific purposes. He kicked it out by breathing in a specific holotropic pattern and then basically gained control over his cardiovascular system, which again, for modern science, if we're just machines, like how does he do that? But it was proven now many, many times over that that amount of control through breath is possible. And so I think we're just at the beginning of, like the tip of the iceberg of what's really possible through breath. And I want to come back to where I started, just noticing where we are and how we're breathing in any moment. I was just sharing. So while you're talking, breath is very different. While you're listening, breath is really different. When I'm listening, interviewing and on my podcast, I, often just place my tongue on the roof of the mouth, close the lips and just notice to have a very regular kind of box breath style where I would breathe in for 4 to 5 seconds, hold for 4 to 5 seconds, breathe out for 4 to 5 seconds, hold again for 4 to 5 seconds, breathe in again, right? So you're in the square of equal in breath, hold, out breath, hold. And it allows us usually to pay more attention to what is going on in the present moment right in front of us.
Wow. Okay. Let's ask for this audience, for performing artists that can sometimes suffer of performance anxiety. And I also know that with age, it actually becomes more and more and more. What would you recommend in terms of breath work that people that find themselves wanting to pass out rather than going on stage? Maybe a few tips and tools that they can do that would ease these kind of symptoms.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. I would dive into the topic of breath work as like a, you know, like looking at it from a modern kind of fusion perspective and just go through a few different techniques, learn them with someone or learn them online somewhere and see how they affect my body and redo those that feel really good because your body actually knows. And breathing is something we all do, every single day. So to add variety and awareness to it is, for me, would always be step one, rather than giving a suggestion what someone should do in a high performance environment. However, especially with, box breath or, you know, longer breath holds, what we can simulate are these moments when kind of our heartbeat takes over and we get really nervous.
Mhm.
And we can learn to get comfortable in that feeling and understand that for one, it passes. And two, it's just a natural signal of our body. And so, I've actually created a course with one of my business partners. It's called Breath Portal. It's breathportal.com. I would start at a place like that where you can learn, many different techniques. We've made over 20 videos with different techniques that are there as a teachable, like easy to digest video. And then I would just, do that on a weekly basis, 3, 4, 5 times a week, maybe more often, to play with your breath and to gain that awareness, to stretch the breath, to make it longer, to make it shorter, to hold it, to not hold it. But once we're connected to our breath in a moment of anxiety, in a moment of high performance, in a moment of athletic performance, we can come back to our breath and we can notice, wait, where's my breath right now? Oh, I wasn't aware of it at all. Let me just for 20 seconds breathe consciously. And so it allows us to bridge any moment and change and transform a moment.
Just shift your focus, really.
And bringing awareness back to it. Yeah. Now, the reason why I started with I would try out many different exercises is because that's part of what will give you the awareness of where your breath is actually happening. Most people, when they're stressed or in like what we call, kind of this PTSD stress kind of freeze that happens, let's say stage fright, or most people hold their breath in those moments. So the first thing would be to do one long exhale, all the air out. And then usually there's still more air in, and just try to get it all out and then come back to a natural breathing rhythm. Observe it and notice if your breath is actually leaving your body. Because stale air in the lungs is something really, really common, and it just means we're not tapping into our full physiological potential.
Interesting. Stale air in the lungs prevents us from like physically actually tapping into our potential. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm simplifying things because I'm not a doctor, but it's something we can all really experiment with. So, for example, if somebody has asthma, the simplified version of what asthma is you have a hard time to get air out of the lungs, right? And so that then creates the phenomena of feeling like it's hard to get more air in. It's like, I can't breathe because there's still air in there that needs to get out first. And so exhaling is usually always where to start, kind of emptying the lungs. So, and the diaphragm, so that you can then fill in the diaphragm and the lungs with oxygen. And from there, you have a complete new experience of that. So I'll give you an example. I happen to like European football, well, football of any kind, but, I grew up in Europe, as you know, as you did. And some players, before they go to kick a free kick or a penalty, they have a ritual, and you can see it. The way they strut, the way they stand, the way they inhale, make the body big, and then exhale and go do the kick.
Mhm.
Now that ritual is to synchronize your movement to your breath. So your breath and your movement are in sync, which then means your potential is moving through your body in the real time that you're, in this case, kicking the ball. If your breath is somewhere else where your body is and you're holding or you're withholding, that usually is set up for, disaster.
Wow. So simple, right? Like you really a very, very simple concept that we're not teaching in any kind of school environment, in a high performance environment, when I look at the performing arts that I'm in, yet so important and really would set people up for success so much bigger. I just learned so much. Thank you for that.
And
I have
I'd
one,
be happy to throw in one more if
yeah,
you'd
but
like to.
I have
So,
one more question on that topic too. So
okay, well,
no,
shall
no,
I
go,
go or you go?
no, you go.
So this one is, I'm not really an expert on this follow up, but I definitely have enough experience to share what I'm sharing, and invite everyone to explore. Now, when we go into the realms of intimacy and tantra, and tantra means many things to many people, but ultimately it's just an ancient body of scriptures and teachings that were derived from these scriptures, and everyone is welcome to look up tantra a bit deeper. But when it comes to tantra and intimacy, it's all connected through the breath. Think of it when two people are making love, or when two people are kissing, or when two people are meeting for that first moment where you look at each other and you're like, oh, there's chemistry. That's all connected back to the breath. So we're actually synchronizing our breath to each other in those scenarios. Now we can practice that with people as well. So you can actually go both into sensual intimacy as well into like non-sensual intimacy with a friend, for example, through syncing your breath and your attention with your eyes together. So We've gone to trainings before that were, and this is the case for non-sensual intimacy, where you'd stand with, another man, for example, eye to eye, face to face. You hold hands in front of your body, so the palms are touching. So there's kind of this feeling of like you are touching, you're connected, but you still have this hold back inside of you. And then you just start synchronizing your breath, and whatever the teacher is guiding you start syncing the breath, and you realize you're literally becoming one with the person that you're standing in front of. It's quite shocking how intimate, how connected we are with people when we allow ourselves to go beyond the delusion that we're all individual, separate beings that, are not connected to each other.
Wow. You just took my breath away, literally. My question was, why do we resist? Why does our body or our brain or our entire being give us so much resistance? And I'm speaking from my perspective and my own experience, just to simply sit down and to take a deep breath. Why does it feels like a revolution inside of me that I really actively have to work against when I practice breath work? Yeah. Do you know
Y-
why that is?
y- Yeah, I mean, there is a part of it that I can describe, and then there's also a part of it that I don't know. Again, when we talk about breath work, I like to widen that understanding out first into breath awareness, and then into pranayama and yogic breathing, and then also the breath work that's called breath work, which is holotropic breathing. Because that form of breath work, huffing and puffing with your mouth open for half an hour or longer, that is really, really challenging every time for anyone.
Okay.
And you got to really soothe yourself into that. So I'm not saying everyone should start doing this all the time. And there's many much simpler ways how to get into what I would include in the breath work, which is breath awareness and pranayama. So maybe the answer to what you're asking is you're wanting too much too fast. And so it makes more sense to just like learn simpler habits and patterns first. But the bigger answer here actually has to do with how, we protect ourselves subconsciously from something different, from change, because of the patterns and the habits we've learned when we were younger. And, this is largely the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza points towards that, where the first 7 years of our life, we program our subconscious, and then that is playing out on us every single day for the rest of our lives. It has to do with the brainwave states, and we could go deeply into that, but it's also really simple to look that up nowadays. And so the subconscious programs in these first 7 years, and so these resistances you carry with yourself all your life. Breathing, deep breathing, breath work, similar to ecstasy through, for example, sex, or ecstasy through psychedelics. Like, this ecstasis opens the subconscious. So when you're breathing your way into opening your subconscious to that place of ecstasy, yeah, I mean, that part of you, that smaller part of you, is just wanting to hold on and be like, no fucking way do I go. Am I going there? Sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to swear or not on this.
Well, don't worry.
I've tried to hold back, but so you're like, your inner procrastination part is going to, go haywire on something like that. Cause like, oh my God, I know what's coming. This is going to be real. That's going to be real. That's going to be a big deal. And so that's why, again, I've guided many people through those scenarios. I am a fan of going slow and easy for beginners, and only going into the hardcore holotropic breathing if you're really ready for it. Because what can show up on the other side is like deeply traumatic releases, deeply, people laugh, people cry, people scream, people shout. All of that happens because you're facing things from your subconscious that have been there for a very long time. And that's part of what holds us back sometimes in those moments, is the body's kind of anticipation that that's exactly what's going to happen next.
Wow. Thank you. I figured that's what's happening for me personally, but now I can see. I told you so. We were right. The next time I feel the resistance, yeah.
Will it make you go and breathe, or will it make you procrastinate?
No, it will actually make me go, not procrastinate, but breathe, because
Mm.
now I really truly know, okay, this is what happens. When I understand personally the process, and I understand, okay, we're here to work together and there is nothing to worry about because it's really just the body putting up the red flags and saying, hey, we're going into uncharted territory. You don't want to go there. We want to hang on to the pain because that's what makes us us. Then I understand. And I can move my mind in different ways that it will release gradually that kind of resistance that makes it sometimes impossible to drop in, even for me personally into meditations, for example.
That's beautifully put. And, I would just want to add to it that, like in many other contexts in life, the context matters, and the safety that is set in the context matters a lot when we go to the more healing part of breath work, because you might not trust every facilitator, but those that you do trust, that's the place where they go deeper, right? And that might be very logical to everyone listening, but it's just one of those things that it's okay to say no. And then it's okay to come back another time later on again, to the deeper, more holotropic experiences. And then when it comes to the simple breath, like, just go to your local yoga class and learn something new. And if you already know all that, then, get a course online or find some videos somewhere, or go find a teacher in another country and really dive deeper into the different stages of the breath.
Thank you. Yeah, let's shift a little bit. I usually ask this question as the last question in the show, but I'm making an exception. Looking at your trajectory, looking at your life, if you could go back to your 16-year-old self, and let's assume he would actually listen to you, what would you tell him?
That is really funny. I like that question. Would he really listen to myself? That's what I'm asking myself right now.
This is why I said, let's assume he would actually sit
Okay,
down.
let's assume he would. What would I tell him? I mean, for one, I would tell him, my 16-year-old self actually was living in Paraguay in South America on an exchange here, and was courageously following my intuition and my desire to, get to know the world. So I would tell that 16-year-old, like, continue to believe in yourself, I would really double down on this. Like, yeah, you're right. You can actually live your dream and it never stops, which was kind of an intuition that 16-year-old had. But, there's still a lot of doubt. And over the last 20 years, I've learned to understand that doubt is part of the process. But I don't think it would hurt to tell the 16-year-old version of myself. There's definitely a part of me that would want to say, just slow down and enjoy the journey even more. There's no need to get anywhere, which is something that's sunken in a lot more in the last 20 years than it had as a 15, 16-year-old, which I guess also has to do with age, but also the society we live in, right? It's like everything is about accomplishments and achievements. And really, like, if you're able to enjoy the journey, it doesn't even matter if you reach the goal, because you will learn so much on the journey and you'll be so connected to the people and the places that alone is going to open up the next step or the next goal or the next objective. And so that's something I would definitely want to tell my 16-year-old self. And I would just say, buckle up. So much more is coming.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's a good one. What gets you up nowadays? Meaning, what excites you? What are you working on? What's coming down the line?
Cheeky answer is, what gets me up is the sun.
Yeah.
I have a sunrise facing bedroom, and every morning when the sun hits the horizon, I'm just good morning. I love it though. That's literally like a joy factor for me. What gets me going in the like in the sense, in the context that you said, Susanne, is really the projects I've been working on for a few years now, which is the triad of podcasting, interviewing, broadcasting, right? Which is one element of my doing in the world, and then the coaching business and the platforms I've built through coaching and consulting over the last 5 years. Because with that, there's online courses, there's physical events. This year we went to Brazil. Next year we're going to go to Brazil again, work with indigenous people, work with regenerative, land projects. So many different exciting elements that, 4 or 5 years into the journey, I'm realizing they are so complementary. And that intuition that led me to start this at the same time and build it and believe in it and be determined all the way till here, that was a great hunch to follow. And it just feels like I'm getting started, because I'm noticing that the more determined I am to that, the more exciting my meetings are with new people, the more, fulfilling it is to interview someone or to be interviewed, like right now, the more, filling it is to my cup and overflowing, to be of service to people and to understand, like, I don't have all the answers, but I'm so committed to the process of living the journey that it really helps many people catalyze and transform what that means for them. And so I'm in that journey, and I'm on the journey of that service. And so that's what gets me out.
Beautiful. The sun gets me up too in the morning. It's my favorite thing. Yeah. That's why I'm not such a big fan for winters and early springs.
I hear you.
Yeah, I like the summer.
I snowbird, so
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm almost there. Okay. Well, if people loved what you're saying and they want to learn more about you, where can we find you?
if anybody is inspired to see more of my work, it's greenplanet-blueplanet.com. I'm sure Susanne's going to put it in the show notes too. And you can find me on Instagram. That's my full name, Julian Guderley, and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these places. Feel free to reach out. There's always going to be time for an answer occasionally, at some point. But greenplanet-blueplanet.com is kind of the main website. There's also breathportal.com for the breathwork course. So there's many different places on the internet for someone to find me. And I'm happy to, pick up a conversation and really understand what it is that matters to you in this life and what you want to build or grow more of. Susanne, I'm really stoked and excited for this episode, but also to have you on my podcast and continue to, share more with the world and hear about your journey. And thank you.
Thank you. By the way, when you put your podcast name into the just the Apple, Google, it comes up as the first one. So there's no need to look for it. It is right there. First one that comes up. All you have to do is Green Planet and it pops right up. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Are you checking right now that that's happening? Oh my goodness. Okay. While you're doing that, let me close up this episode. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for going so deep on the most life-giving thing that we do in every second that we're here in our physical form. I learned quite a bit today. So thank you for being here and thank you for making a difference in the world.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. If this message resonates with you, please pass it on to someone who needs to hear this right now. And if you like what you've heard, your feedback will go a very long way. If you just take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star review, that would mean the world to me. Till next time, point at yourself to rise to all that you are capable of.